So, 2025, how was it for you? I've got to say, I've had better years, it has to be said. I find myself in a slightly different place in December than I did in January. But hey, listen, stuff happens, as they say, and we're going to look back on the year from January to December. We want your input, of course, as well. So you can message us on X, you can message us on Facebook, you can message us through our YouTube channel as well. And if you are on the YouTube channel, don't forget to like it and subscribe to it. And also, you can join our Substack, where you get extra material every single day throughout the course of the Christmas holidays, apart from anything else. And we're going to give you plank of the day as well. But let's kick things off, shall we, with January, because it's amazing how you forget. When I looked back as to what had actually happened in January, it seemed so long ago that I could scarcely remember it. But January was when Tulip Siddiq, you might remember her, resigned as Economic Secretary of the Treasury over corruption charges, because not only was she Economic Secretary of the Treasury, she was also the Corruption Minister. And unfortunately for her, she got accused by a Bangladeshi court of being corrupt. And later on in the year, of course, she was convicted of that and sentenced to some time in prison. So that was the first kind of block that fell from Keir Starmer's government. It was also the beginning of Rachel Reeves's tax onslaught into ordinary working people that she said, of course, as we know her, Richard III. So she put VAT on private school fees, which of course meant for her that she would be able to hire something like 3,500 teachers and put them into the state system. But of course, you won't be surprised to know they didn't manage to do that. So in fact, there are no more teachers in the system than there were. In fact, there's actually fewer teachers in the system than they were. So that was another broken promise by old Richard III.
I worked as an economist at the Bank of England before entering politics.
Rachel Thieves, as we like to know her. You know, another thing that I didn't actually realise until I looked it up was that in January also Bradford, that bastion of culture, that country, what was I going to say? I was going to say that country inside of a country, because it kind of is, began its year as the UK City of Culture. I mean, I don't know how that went. If you're from Bradford, maybe you can let me know. Luke Littler also became the world's youngest darts champion. The young boy who lives on a diet of kebabs and fish and chips and hamburgers has become a very, very wealthy man through the course of 2025. Also, Yvette Cooper announced the first of very many inquiries into so many things, because the one thing that this government does well is launch an inquiry. They don't necessarily actually hold an inquiry, they just say they're going to have one. And she launched an inquiry into grooming gangs, which of course didn't then happen. What they said was at the time, oh, we don't need a national inquiry into grooming gangs, we're just going to have a few local ones, because we've already had a national one. She also launched another inquiry into the murders in Southport by that ghastly, awful individual, Axel Rudy Cabana. And his trial started around about January as well, and he was sentenced in the end to a maximum or a minimum of 52 years in jail. Not bleeding long enough. And then finally, the one other thing that happened in January was the Office for National Statistics, and we often talk to Jamie Jenkins, who used to work there, predicted that the UK's population will reach 72.5 million by 2032. I think we're probably already there, don't you? So now we find ourselves in February, right? Now, you might remember this particular incident because it was famous all over the world, and it was, of course, when Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine went over to see Donald Trump, who had just taken over as president, of course, having won the election at the back end of 2024. Him and J.D. Vance in the White House, in the Oval Office, if you remember, suddenly started shouting at Volodymyr Zelensky. And people were outraged. They were going, blimey, you can't talk to him like that. He's like a war hero. Well, it turns out he's not really a war hero. He's actually somebody who's taken a great deal of money from a great many countries around the world. And he went to the White House, and Donald Trump accused him of actually not respecting the office of the president, and not respecting America, and not being grateful enough for all the money that he was receiving. And it was really quite the moment, and it really changed, I think, an awful lot of people's views on Zelensky. Some people on the left were like, Donald Trump's a disgrace, what a terrible way to behave. But actually, you know, in the long run, Zelensky came around, he eventually made up with Donald Trump, and, you know, they're still talking to each other. So that goes an awfully long way to telling you that Trump probably got that right, as he often does. It was also the first time that the Labour government under the auspices of Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, decided to do away with local elections. They announced that they were going to delay for a year the elections in East Sussex, in West Sussex, in Essex, in Thurrock, in Hampshire, in the Isle of Wight, in Norfolk, in Suffolk, in Surrey. And guess what? They didn't just delay it for a year, because now they're not going to have them in May of 2026 either. They're going to delay them for another 2 years. So actually, they're going to delay them for 3 years. So it's like democracy has been put on hold thanks to the Labour government. Absolutely extraordinary. They also lost another minister, in January, as we said. Tulip Sadiq went. Health Minister Andrew Gwynn was the one who got the heave-ho in February, because he put out some rather unfortunate tweets, including one in which he said that he was looking forward to the pensioners not getting their winter fuel allowance, because some of them who've never voted Labour in their life would die off, which was pretty ghastly, pretty awful, and he disappeared from trace. Also, the Prime Minister announced yet another inquiry, this time into the Nottingham stabbing attacks by Valdo Calocane, of course, who was the guy who came here on a student visa, overstayed it, turned into a schizophrenic, and for some bizarre reason decided to start attacking young people in the early hours of the morning the year before. Absolutely shocking. Also, Rachel Reeves, Richard III, to you and I, was herself once again at the centre of an investigation. The BBC revealed that she'd been investigated while she was a senior manager at HBOS, when she was Rachel from Accounts, or Rachel from Complaints, and it turned out that she'd claimed for some expenses which were not actually kosher, if you like, and she was forced to answer an internal inquiry inside of the bank as to why she was claiming for things that she hadn't actually spent money on. It also, of course, was revealed that she then lied on her CV.
I worked as an economist at the Bank of England.
About working for the Bank of England for 10 years, because, of course, we know she only worked for the Bank of England for 5 years and not for 10. So Rachel got it in the neck as well. Punchy Labour MP Mike Amesbury, remember him? He's a guy that got done up for punching a constituent in Runcorn. His seat then eventually was won by Sarah Pochin for Reform. But he had his prison sentence suspended, so he didn't bother going to prison, which is unfortunate. And also the BBC got themselves into some hot water as well, because they had to launch yet another inquiry into how they managed to put out a documentary about Gaza without checking that the subject of the documentary was a boy, a teenage boy of about 14 or 15, who it turned out was the son of a Hamas official. Nobody bothered to ask the question, are you sure that this guy doesn't have a father who's in Hamas? Surely that would have been the first question that you would ask. And then, yet again, as we came to the end of the month, International Development Minister Annalisa Dodds resigned because the government slashed the foreign aid budget, because they said, oh, we need some more money to prop up their ailing economy, because Richard III's managed to screw it up so badly that we're going to have to do that. So, absolutely extraordinary stuff. February, a short month, but a very, very controversial one. Let's look at March now, the third month of the year, and the month that my mother would have been 101 in if she'd managed to survive as long as she did. She didn't, unfortunately. Keir Starmer convened the first sort of proper Ukraine summit under his auspices, and he promised to give Ukraine £1.6 billion of taxpayers' money in a missile deal. Nobody actually gave him permission to do that. He just decided to do it in and of himself. He also announced that NHS England was going to be abolished. I mean, you might as well abolish the whole of the NHS for all I care. But, what they've done is basically renamed a bit of it, and it's managed to make it worse than it was before. Absolutely incredible stuff. Reform UK also in the news in March, because they suspended Rupert Lowe and referred him to the police over threats that they said he made to Zia Yusuf. And that was the beginning of the split, which is still running like a bit of a running saw down the leg of Reform. Rupert Lowe still very critical of them, as is Ben Habib. But that was the beginning of the sort of the contrariness of Rupert Lowe. And of course, it ended up with him being kicked out of the party. You might also remember Matt Hancock. He appeared before the COVID inquiry for the first time since leaving government many, many years ago. And sort of more or less apologised and blamed everything pretty much on Boris Johnson, not on the fact that he had his hands down the backside of Gina Lollobrigida, or Gina, as she was known, snogging away in his office. He didn't mention that at all, funnily enough. Also, Netflix drama Adolescence, that started and came out in March, and was the first UK TV show which wasn't actually made by any normal television company. So for the first time, they got 6.45 million viewers on the beginning of their first night, which was pretty damn impressive, it has to be said. Official figures also showed government borrowing up to 10.7 billion in February. It was higher than forecast. It was meant to be 4 billion, so they spent an extra 6 billion of your money. Absolutely unbelievable. Also, van production came to an end at Vauxhall's Luton plant after 120 years. And you might remember, if you were trying to go anywhere on holiday, Heathrow Airport got shut down because some idiot managed to start a fire in an electricity substation next to Heathrow. And everybody went, how have you got an airport that can just be shut down by one fire in one substation? What have you done that for? And it turned out that the bloke who runs Heathrow, who's supposed to be some Danish bloke, was out on the RAS and wasn't able to come and make a decision because he was sleeping, because he'd had a few too many Negronis that night. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Also, Birmingham City Council declared a major incident for the first time with their bin strike. That was the beginning of it. And we have rats the size of dogs running around up there now. I think they're still there. I think if you're waiting for your bin to be emptied in Birmingham, you're probably still waiting. Absolutely incredible. And also Justin Welby, the outgoing Archbishop of Canterbury, said that he forgave his good friend John Smythe, who was busy abusing young boys for most of his career in the church. Justin Welby, of course, very forgiving person. Very nice for him too. And now, of course, the Archbishop of Canterbury is a woman. Wouldn't you know it? So that was March. We'll have April next. So we're into April already, the 4th month of the year. Extraordinarily, this was when two things happened that I think even you will be surprised at, because I'd forgotten completely that the cost of a first-class stamp went up and the cost of your BBC licence fee went up as well. And it hasn't been a great year for the BBC, but when you look at it in black and white, it's quite shocking. The cost of an annual TV licence went up to £174.50. In my head, I thought it was about 110 quid. £174.50. And worse than that, cost of a first-class stamp has gone up to £1.70, which is a good reason why nobody ever sends you any letters, basically. And it's also, by the way, not guaranteed that you'll get your post there the following day. They don't guarantee that anymore, so it might be first class, it might be £1.70, but there's no guarantee that it actually gets to its destination at all. Extraordinary. Also, the UK government took control of Scunthorpe Steelworks. You might remember that because it went out of business, and they put that complete and utter idiot Jonathan Reynolds in charge of it. Do you remember him? He's the fake solicitor. He's the guy who pretended for 10 years that he was a solicitor. And not only did he pretend to be one, he kept telling everyone. And funnily enough, I remember reporting on this at the time. He didn't just say, I'm a qualified solicitor. He actually spent an entire evening talking to, I think it was Luke Johnson, the entrepreneur, at a dinner party about what a great job he had as a solicitor. So the man is an absolute fantasist, right? He just continues to try and convince everyone that he was a solicitor when he in fact wasn't. I mean, most people in that situation would have to resign. But suddenly he's now in charge of British Steel instead.